200 Years Together. On Russian-Jewish Relations. 1795 to 1995. Alexander Isayevich Solzhenitsyn. 2001-2002. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Introduction to this translation. 200 Years Together is a 2-volume historical essay by Nobel Prize-winning author Alexander Solzhenitsyn dealing with the Russian-Jewish relations from 1795, leading up to the Communist Revolution, Volume 1, and then through the Communist era to 1995, Volume 2. The original Russian volumes were first published in 2001 and 2002 respectively. French, Fayard, 2002, and German, Herbig, 2003, translations were published soon after, but until now only a partial English translation of this remarkable work was available in the Solzhenitsyn Reader, New and Essential Writings, Lanham, 2006. The importance of a complete English translation has been discussed online ever since the books were first published, and in October 2010 the first chapters were posted online on a WordPress site called Adam's Blog. However, the owner of that site received a warning by the copyright holders in August 2011 and the translation process stopped in its tracks. It wasn't until January 2017 that voices showing the public interest in a full English translation became loud enough that pseudonymous people took it upon themselves to finish what had been started nearly a decade earlier. This translation has been a combined effort by several people. Chapters 4 and 5 from Volume 1, as well as chapters 13, 14 and 16 to 27 were translated pseudonymously by multiple people and posted online in 2010. Chapters 2, 3 and 6 through 12, as well as chapter 15 have been translated between February and March of the year 2017. They were made available pseudonymously by David and Davina Davison. These chapters were translated from French. Chapter 1 is of unknown origin, it was posted on 8chan in PDF format. Some footnotes from the French edition have been edited in. The translation for this chapter is not complete and a better version will likely be made and included in future editions of this work. Other translations of some of these chapters can be found online. There exists an alternative partial translation of chapters 2, 3 and 6 from the original Russian. I decided to use the one made by the Davisons because the writing was of superior quality and no difference in the content was found. If you find any errors in this publication, look for my contact details at the incorrect library. Shadilai, March 2017. Commentary from the Alexander Solzhenitsyn Center. Alexander Solzhenitsyn's 200 Years Together, a 2-volume history of Russian-Jewish relations, initially grew out of the Red Wheel, his monumental opus on the Russian Revolution. In the Red Wheel, Solzhenitsyn had shown the revolution in full complexity, and indeed, to avoid boiling down the complexity or skewing it via the narrow prism of Russian-Jewish relations, he gave the Red Wheel priority of publication in every major language, ahead of 200 Years Together. Now that the full Red Wheel is well on its way to being published in English, an authorized translation of 200 Years Together is in progress and scheduled for publication in 2024. In 200 Years Together, Solzhenitsyn emphatically denies, in chapters 9 and 14, that the Russian revolutions of 1905 and 1917 were the result of a Jewish conspiracy, just as he had earlier forcefully criticized the extreme nationalists who were and are obsessed with Freemasons and Jews. See, for example, Russia in Collapse, Chapter 25, The Maladies of Russian Nationalism. 200 Years Together was first published in Russian in 2001-02, and several times since. The definitive Russian edition is published by Vremya, Moscow, 2015, as volumes 26 and 27 of their ongoing 30-volume collected works of Solzhenitsyn. An authorized French translation is published in 2 volumes by Fayard. Du siècle ensemble, tome 1, Juif et Russe avant la Révolution. Du siècle ensemble, tome 2, Juif et Russe pendant la période soviétique. An authorized German translation is published in 2 volumes by Herbig. With respect to an English edition, to recapitulate the above, an authorized translation of the full work is in progress and scheduled for publication in 2024. Meanwhile, readers need to be forewarned that any and all English versions available on the internet we consider illegal, pirated, a gross violation of international copyright law, and/or entirely unauthorized, often poorly and loosely translated, and redact passages, and indeed whole chapters, that apparently do not support the prejudices of those behind these illegal editions. Introduction to the material by the author. Having worked with the history of the Russian Revolution for 50 years, I have encountered many times the problems between the Russians and the Jews. Again and again these worked themselves into the happenings, drove a wedge into the human psyche and whipped up passions. I did not lose hope that an author would beat me to the punch and bring forth, with the necessary amplitude and equilibrium, this bright spear. But we are dealing more often with one-sided reproaches. Either the Russians are guilty against the Jews, worse, guilty of perpetual depravity, and rightly so, or, on the other hand, the Russians who have treated this problem rationally have done so for the most part excessively harsh, without giving the other party even the slightest merit. It cannot be said that there is a lack of publishers, notably among the Russian jury, though they are far more numerous than amongst the Russians. Nevertheless, despite the abundance of brilliant minds and decorated pens, we still have not had an up-to-date analysis of our mutual history that can satisfy both parties. We must learn not to tighten the rope when it is already so tense. I would have liked to apply my efforts to a subject less thorny. But I believe this history, or at least the effort to penetrate it, should not remain forbidden. The history of the Jewish problem in Russia, and Russia only, is above all else exceptionally rich. Talking about it means listening to new voices and passing them on to the reader. In this book, the Jewish voices will be heard more often than those of the Russians. But the whirlwinds of the social climate force us towards the razor's edge. You can feel the weight of both sides, all the grievances and accusations, plausible as well as improbably, which grow as they go. The purpose that guides me throughout this work on the life common the Russians and the Jews consists of looking for all the points necessary for a mutual understanding, all the possible voices which, once we get rid of the bitterness of the past, can lead us towards the future. Like all other people, like all of us, the Jewish people is at the same time an active and passive element of history, more than once they have accomplished, be it unconsciously, important works that history has offered them. The Jewish problem has been observed from diverse angles, but always with passion and often in self-delusion. Yet the events which have affected this or that people in the course of history have not always, far from, been determined by this one people, but by all those who surrounded it. An attitude that is too passionately for one party or the other is humiliating to them. Nevertheless, there cannot be problems that man can't approach with reason. Speaking openly, amply, is more honest, and, in our case precise, speaking about it is essential. Alas, mutual wounds have piled up in popular memory. But if we look at the past, when will the memory heal? As long as popular opinion does not find a pen to shed light thereupon, it will stay a vague rumor, worse, menacing. We cannot cut ourselves off from the past centuries permanently. Our world has shrunk, and, whatever are the dividing lines, we find ourselves neighbors again. For many years I have delayed writing this book. I would have been glad not to take this burden upon me, but the delays of my life have neared exhaustion, and here I am. I have never been able to acknowledge anyone's right to conceal any of what has been. Neither can I accept any agreement founded on bringing false light on the past. I call both parties, Russian and Jewish, to look for mutual understanding, to recognize each other's share of the sin, because it is easy to look away. Surely this is not us. I sincerely strive to comprehend the two parties in the presence of this long historical conflict. I plunge myself into the events, not the polemics. I want to show. I won't enter into the discussions except for those extreme cases where fairness is covered by layers upon layers of lies. I dare hope that this book will not be received by the extremists and the fanatics, that, on the contrary, it will favor mutual understanding. I hope to find caring people amongst the Jews as well as the Russians. Here is how the author envisaged his task and ultimate goal, to try and foresee, in the future of Russo-Jewish relations, accessible ways that could lead to the good of all. 1995. I wrote this book by bending myself only on what the historical materials told and looking for charitable issues for the future. But let's face it, in recent years the situation in Russia has evolved in such a drastic fashion that the problems studied herein have found themselves relegated to the background and don't have the acuteness today of Russia's other problems. 2000. On the perimeter of this study. What could be the limits of this book? I am fully aware of the complexity and breadth of the subject matter. I understand that it also has a metaphysical aspect. It is even said that the Jewish problem can be rigorously understood only from a mystical and religious point of view. Of course I recognize the reality from this point of view, but, although many books have already touched the subject, I think it remains inaccessible to men, that it is by nature out of scope, even for the experts. Yet all the important purposes of human history contain mystical influences. This does not prevent us from examining them on a concrete historical plane. I doubt whether we should necessarily call upon superior considerations to analyze phenomena which are within our immediate reach. Within the limits of our earthly existence, we can make judgments on the Russians, as well as on the Jews, starting from lowly criteria. As for those above, let's leave them to God. I want to clarify this problem only in the categories of history, politics and everyday life and culture, and almost exclusively within the limits of the 2 centuries of Russians and Jews living together in one state. Never would I have dared to approach the depths of the Jewish history, or quadrimillennial, sufficiently represented in numerous works and in meticulous encyclopedias. Neither do I intend to examine the history of the Jews in the countries nearest to us, Poland, Germany, Austria-Hungary. I concentrate myself on Russian-Jewish relations, insisting on the 20th century, so crucial and so catastrophic in the destiny of our 2 peoples. Based on the hard experience of our coexistence, I try to dispel the misunderstandings, false accusations, while recalling the legitimate grievances. The works published in the first decades of the 20th century have had little time to embrace this experience in its totality. Of course, a contemporary author cannot overlook their existence, despite half a century and the state of Israel as well as its enormous influence on the lives of the Jews and other peoples over the globe. He cannot, if only if he wants extensive comprehension on the internal life of Israel and its spiritual orientations, also through incidental reflections. This must shine through in this book. But it would be an outrageous claim on the part of the author not to introduce here an analysis of the problems inherent to Zionism and the life of Israel. I nevertheless give special attention to the writings published in our day by the learned Russian Jews who lived for decades in the Soviet Union before emigrating to Israel, and who have therefore had the opportunity to reflect, from their own experience, on a number of Jewish problems.